Hey, well, thank you very much for coming and joining me on this webinar today. So most of you would know me fairly well by now. I'm Becky Carr, and today what I'm doing is just having a look at the 360 feedback again. It's such an amazing tool, and I often get asked, you know, when do you use it and how do you use it? So I wanted to make this webinar based on it. You know, for me, it's such a helpful tool for coaching, especially leadership, really getting down to the nitty-gritty. You know, it's a really great tool because it reveals things like strengths, development areas, peer perceptions, you know, coachable directions for me, and basically a direction on how to achieve a higher level of performance from some really good feedback and information. But here's the thing, it really needs to be used correctly. And for those of you who do use it, you've probably seen it used wrong and other times as well. And it can be quite dangerous to do that. But done well, it can really give you some really good, tight, constructive feedback to follow and, you know, really good discussion points. So as you can imagine though, respondents are pretty nervous when you ask them to do a feedback or a survey like this. So, you know, done poorly, as I just said, I've actually seen it before too. They can become very defensive and very critical. You may even have some people that just refuse to do it. So it's definitely for companies, which I'll talk about later too, that have an open and very safe sort of policy or channels for communication. So look, I didn't really want to do a hugely technical how-to video today or webinar. I really wanted to go through some tips and tricks about how I use it, the applications, and some stages that I actually go through. And quite a few of them are actually left out. So I wanted to refresh and remind you on how to use it. So here's our agenda for today. We've got 5 parts to this webinar. Some of you are already familiar with the 360s, and that's great. But others of you on here are not familiar. So let's start with a little bit about what they are themselves. The second issue today, obviously pretty important for information like questions to ask and how you set things up. Not the actual technical setup, but what some of the pre-planning is. Then stage 3, we're going to look at sort of the actual execution. So you'll see what's involved with this. It's also too about making participants comfortable as well as choosing the right questions for it. Stage 4, today is a quick look at very quick look, I can lead you in the right direction for the uploading, the actual information and structure of looking at that. The last one, stage 5, is the all-important how you read the data, deliver it and prepare blind spot report, for example, for your presentation and summaries. So let's start a little bit about the 360s themselves. So the stage 1. As you say, many people already know about it and you probably even use them. But if you're starting out, they can be a little bit daunting to start to want to put into a proposal with your clients, or if you're managers wanting to use with your teams or employees. So I wanted to just, I guess, let you know that they're not that scary, and HR profiling certainly make it easier to implement. So here we go on the 360. So first off, just remember that it's not part of the standard extended DISC behavioural assessments that are available. This is a completely different tool. It's got its own set of different questions actually that you can bring up yourself or use templates, and we'll have a look at that. It's an online based tool again, so that makes it easier for everyone to be assessed and for actually assessed anywhere, anytime, and for others to contribute, of course. And the main thing here is that it's mainly implemented anonymously. So it's pretty important, that part, because participants then feel safer answering questions where they can be open and honest without having to defend their perception or opinion about something about the person. So it measures perceived skills, behaviours, competencies of either an individual, usually an individual person, you know, depending on how it's been set up, but are usually individuals. Some people get this a little bit muddled up with surveys. This is a type of survey, but this is about a single person. Surveys tend to be about companies, or of course you can make that about groups of people. So it measures, it's also already used in many areas, such as things like performance appraisals, succession planning, team development. I'll have a little look further at this as well. But the 360 is designed to measure the opinion of a group of people, usually from all around that individual. So that's hence where the 360 comes from. So what I mean by that specifically is that it actually does give feedback from their peers, a manager, and of course the direct reports. And then in addition, the tool is about a self-assessment too. So it's really amazing how the depth of knowledge that you can get out of it for putting together development plans. I have to say the Open 360 is a tool to provide feedback on that individual performance, as we just talked about. But by combining the self-assessment with the feedback of managers, peers, and direct reports into an anonymous report, you're actually then able to focus on specific paths that the individual can take. And this is what I use a lot, you know, in my proposals and when I'm writing them for development plans especially. I will often do it in two parts where I have an analysis or assessment, and I won't necessarily already put the detail in the second part until the data I get actually reveals what needs to be coached or taught. So just keep that in mind as well. Don't be afraid to actually use this as an analysis stage and write it in. Oh yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that you knew how to use it anyway. So the next part is common uses. I'd have to say most companies I work with are pretty amazed at the scope of the 360 degree, you know, and how you can use it. Here's some of the common uses. So as a team development tool, it's a good start in developing high performing teams. Give team members an opportunity to give feedback from other team members in a positive way. And of course, any frustrations that can be discussed in a positive light. Increases openness and feedback with the organisation. It's aimed for team communication, but I have to say, if you're going to deliver the information, you do need to know how to do that. So skilled trainers, consultants, or skilled managers can be taught how to use this for solving interactive problems, things like conflict. A tool for managers to get to know their team better. That speaks pretty easily for itself. Performance appraisals, and this is a new thing, we're going to talk about that today. Performance management, training needs identification, I mean, you get the picture, leadership management, all sorts of things. And of course, skills development. So that's a pretty cool list of really useful business issues. And because it is in the present, you know the results are not only about theory, but real everyday behaviours. And that's what I really enjoy using about the 360. But even though today's webinar is more about sort of the feedback and application, we do have to touch a little bit on some of the setting up, but I won't go into too much detail, just to give you an overview anyway. So, stage 2, pre-planning questions for yourself. I have to say, pre-planning is often rushed in the scheme of things, and we tend to go into the actual setup stage a little bit too quickly sometimes. So here are a few questions to ask yourself first as to why you are choosing a 360 and actually if it's really suitable at the time. One question I do consider first is, you know, has the person been employed at their job long enough to receive meaningful feedback from people around them, like their peers, like their manager, you know? So, and I'd probably have to consider at least 12 months is usually the guideline here before 360s should really take place. And I've done a fair bit of reading on that too, and it seems to be an agreed standard, and I kind of like that guideline. So if not, I tend to think that if they're less than 12 months, then it's still really part of the induction stage. And so that might be better done as a face-to-face review with the managers or getting information back, because there could be other things holding it up as well, like processes and bits and pieces. So we also need to, on this, then have a look at when you would not use a 360. And again, I get asked this question all the time, Bex, should I use this right now or should I not? And sometimes, you know, you just need a guideline for it. So here's a few ideas or thoughts for you. So there are 3, I guess, wrong ways to use the 360 assessment. certainly I would not involve the 360 tool for some of these. I certainly wouldn't use it to single out a problem employee. Using a 360 instrument in this manner can often create a perception of multi-rater feedback as only for poor performers. Let me remind you again that communication and involvement in the pre-setup conversations are pretty important, and we'll have a look at those as well. If the respondent thinks it's a bit of a witch hunt or focusing just on them, the results won't be received very well. So trying to single out or to raise an issue through this type of tool can be pretty dangerous. The other thing is too, and it's getting used more and more for performance evaluations and reviews. I'll be talking on this a little bit more, but I would especially not use this if there's any kind of performance appraisal that it's tied to compensation decisions. An employee's development plan can certainly be shared between sort of two systems of appraisal, not necessarily having to do a 360. However, experience shows that, you know, formal 360 feedback should be utilised independently if it is to be viewed as a development process and not perceived as having a direct financial impact. So, you know, clearly if the person is going to be improving as a result of their feedback on new skills and behaviours, the changes should be recognised and reflected in the individual's performance review. So be very careful about using 360 and tying it to any kind of remuneration package. I've seen it done and I've seen it not go so well. The last one is in an organisation where trust or open communication is absent. Look, if you're going into a company either as a consultant or, you know, as a manager, your company has a lot of issues going on, then be very careful with using this, because it can prove itself useless, because participants and management need to be involved fully to gain the full understanding of goals and purpose of the tool. You know, things like providing a 360 feedback will not by itself solve the problems of a poorly functioning company. Basically, in that situation, you'd need a full-on development or strategy plan. So it should be, you know, the 360-degree feedback reflects subjective feedback, while it gives much more rounded view of a person, no, not just the boss. It is, by its very nature, based on the rater's perception of a person's behaviour skill. You know, and that perception plays a massive part in how we reflect on reality. So again, just be very careful. So there's sort of three areas I wouldn't use it in. Singling out a problem employee, using it or tying it to monetary value in some way in a review. And I definitely wouldn't use it in an organisation where there is a lot of issues with trust and open communication. I have actually used it years ago. I used one like that, and all it did is really amplify the issues rather than calming it down. Okay, so here's these pre-planning questions. And again, you know, this gets rushed over, so it's really good to sort of stop and have a look at these. So before you use your 360 feedback in the organisation, it's also important to make sure you have a properly set expectations with all participants, as well as those that will be doing the actual rating themselves. So here are the 5 questions that you must answer before you press send to distribute 360 surveys out and about. So first of all, who is going through the 360 feedback? Some of the time I just get people that just say, oh yeah, we'll get Susan to do it, Bob to do it, etc. And then halfway through they might put in another couple of people for whatever reason. So this kind of thing really needs to be sorted out prior. Is it going to be a leadership team? Is it the direct reports, or who is it? So just to make sure that you have some structure. The next one is who chooses the raters? You know, there's a bit of best practice here. Is it to allow the participant, you know, the person about to receive the feedback, to choose their own raters, their boss, their peer, the direct reports that they want to answer it? Is it their manager or HR that can review a list and make suggestions of what they would like as well? So funnily enough, what tends to be most successful is where you actually get the person themselves to choose a list of a few people, and HR or managers edit or inject their thoughts as well on that. I have to say it's human nature for them to pick people that they get on well with, that are friends, that might be a little less assertive, so they won't maybe put certain issues. So it is very, very important to get the right raters. And the other thing too, that they know who this person is. I had one not too long ago where I didn't have a lot to do with the setup of the 360, which is pretty unusual. But in this case, they chose people that they said, you know, hey, Becky, we can't really answer these questions. We don't really work with them in that capacity. We don't see them. We just see them every couple of months when we get together for a conference. And I was thinking, what? That's a huge waste. So be careful who those raters are. The other thing is who will see the report. You think about it. You know, you thought, does it go out to the respondent? Does it go to their manager? Does it go to the peers, or is it going to be looked at together in a team, which I've also done as well? So this kind of thing needs to be clarified, because at the next stage where you set up expectations, the person has a right to know who's going to see it as well. Obviously, the other one is who will debrief the results with me. And sometimes it might be their manager. Other times it might be people like myself. I do a lot of the debriefing, but I've also seen it done with managers that are quite skilled at doing this. Where it can get really difficult, I have to say, is debriefing peer to peer. When one of their peers end up debriefing them on it, that's tricky, but possible. And in a culture where it's open and kind, that can be done. But usually I'd probably advise a third party to actually do the debriefing with people. The other thing is too, setting up what am I expected to do after getting my report, you know, okay, what now? So participants could create a personal action plan, which is often what I do as well, that they share with their manager. Even if their manager doesn't see the actual individual report for whatever reason, maybe you've agreed to keep it anonymous. But that does build accountability to the whole process, and after all, that's pretty important. The outcome is for the individual to gain awareness about their behaviour or an effectiveness, and to commit, I guess, to a couple of goals for improvement. That is my main area, is trying to get them to commit for a couple of goals in improvement areas. Some organisations incorporate these goals into their leaders or their people's performance reviews as well, and I'll talk about that. So the questions are best addressed during, let's say, a 30-minute meeting with a participant along with their answers. I like sharing things like the survey questions and the sample report to show how the results might be displayed. So in setting this up, getting their buy-in, I will often say, hey guys, you know, this is what a sample report looks like, or I might not, but I might sit down with the people that are going to have the 360 and just say, this is the purpose of it. These are please select the people that you would like to rate you. These are the outcomes. And I have to say, by taking time to set those kind of things up, it has worked very well. So setting up expectations up front, they will have a lot more positive growth experience in doing this. So again, I want to talk a little bit more about expectations in this next stage as well. Okay, so stage 3, execution and the pre-questionnaire expectations. So I have to say now that managing those expectations going forward is pretty critical. So while a 360 review can always provide insights and value for an employee, they work best when they are actually ready for the particular type of feedback. So good advice is, good advice is tell them what to expect, how to answer, not actually what to answer, but how to answer, making it easy. So they're not feeling dread of the unknown. Even the best administered 360 review can be misread like a personal attack, and when a subject is actually just not ready for feedback. If that happens, you'll end up in damage control, and it's really not a great idea to be doing 360s. So it's vital for the administrator and manager to successfully get buy-in from the participants before they start the 360. Agreeing with and having their cooperation is essential. So let's have a look a little bit more at expectations and setup. So as I've already mentioned, most people are pretty nervous of doing a survey like this. So it's good to take time to explain the questionnaire. Sometimes I take a sample in, as I said, and sometimes I don't. Funnily enough, recently I haven't been, because I get a bit worried about influencing, or they get a bit stuck on the detail and they start looking into the questions and getting a bit nervous. So lately I've just explained what I'm about to hear. So I explained that the 360 report is amalgamated feedback on specific issues. I explained that nobody's good at everything, that just about everybody can choose to develop in areas that they want to when we look at the results. The report might show your own opinion at being both higher or lower than other people's opinions. The report classifies the scores into a really simple coding: green, yellow, and red, so that makes it really easy to read. Most importantly, the report's anonymous, so you can give honest feedback about each other, or you will receive anonymous feedback. The purpose of the report is to lead a discussion as to any coaching or training or ways that you can have support or assistance to develop a specific skill that might be deemed to be important. So now let's look at the questions that you might intend to include in the 360s. Oh, I should have flipped over this before, sorry, I must have skipped a page. So I do get asked a lot, Becky, what kind of questions should we include? And look, there's so many different questions. One of the things I do think you should do, though, is keep the questions in line with your organisational goals and values. But saying that, there is a myriad of questions to choose from, and I've just got up on the slide now that I've caught up. Some ideas, headers, and then some little subject lines as well, so have a look. The questions you'll probably ask will be very much depend on your organisation and which model of the review you decide to use. So what I mean by that is that we do actually have templates, and I'll explain those as well. So these reviews are, I can tell you, it's like a whole industry out there just for these questions in themselves, because it's so critical to get them right. They are often set by talking to, like for me as a consultant, I'll spend quite a bit of time talking to the managers, talking to the C-suite managers, talking to the peers, etc., and getting a real idea for the type of question and how deep I would need to go with them. Every consultant will have a different method of doing this, so I've just got a very basic one up here. But my experience is there's nothing stopping you from using HR Profiling's templates. They actually have quite a few that I'll show you in a second. Otherwise, make your own. Don't be too scared to do it. So when you are creating these, you get asked about what question groups you would like, so the headings of the question groups, and then each question group can nut down into the actual questions. And for me, I've had quite a bit of background with aligning it with organisational goals, values, core values, etc. And that's been pretty good, so they can understand how the connection is there. But look, on the screen you can see I've got things like leadership skills, for example. Under that you could have questions about delegation, responsibility, vision, listening, approachability. Let's have a look right down the bottom at interpersonal skills, for example. You can ask questions on empathy, confidence, stress management, positivity, group, how approachable they are, enthusiasm, appearance. So if you don't want to create your own question group, because I understand it can be long-winded, and it can be long-winded, full stop. So if you don't want to do that, there is also the opportunity to have a look at the templates that we have got in the system. Before I show you those, I just wanted to make sure though 4 tips for choosing questions. In my opinion, and just through the bit of research, what I find is there's some questions that might be better to stay away from. So I think one of the ones was really highly technically skilled based questions. Those can actually be answered better in a different type of system or a different way. So just stay, testing someone's skills as like a test in here, probably not the right thing to do. The other thing is choosing questions, understanding the difference between multi-choice, open, or the Likert question, which tends to be pretty typical in here. I definitely tend to use the Likert questions, but every question group I end with an open question. So people have a forum for giving feedback about anything that I may not have gone into depth enough or even asked the question about. The other thing is, they say keep your surveys short. I know the good old capped amount is probably about 50 questions, but I also know companies that go to 70 or 80, but it does take quite a while for the respondents, etc., to be answering that. So be aware, especially if they're answering about each other and themselves, they might end up having to do 10 different surveys about different people, and that often happens. The other thing is just with choosing questions, just be aware that if you are choosing it in the Think system, there is different scales for the questions. Just make sure that you stay with the same scale, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, for example. Don't start using different scales for different questions. It gets too confusing for everyone. So as you can see here, I was talking about templates, and I have to say this is a tiny portion from a much bigger list that's available to you. Now, this one is, as you can see, there are about leadership, and that's more about sales management, but there's questions that answer project management, general management, administration. There's a heap of different sales ones. And I have to say, if you want to, I think this is so much easier if you just ask HR Profiling for the relevant one. They can give you a sample of what the different questionnaires are like. I have pretty much always used one of theirs and then gone through it and edited it for exactly what I need. So it gives me the backbone of what I really need to do. And I find that so much easier. So they are quite long, but you can obviously shorten them down as well. So you do have a really good choice if you need to have them. So for those that may not be familiar, they are in your Finks, but they can be put into your Finks account and you can draw down on them and the right one will come up. I wasn't actually going to talk about this today, but it's getting more and more popular. And that is we know that the 360 tool originally was designed for development purposes, but I have to say it's been used increasingly more for giving feedback for annual performance appraisals. And personally, I think it works really well, done right. So while a standard annual review is usually about the job an employee is doing, a 360 review is about the employee themselves. So from my point of view, that makes it very personal and very powerful. Combined and implemented together, it gives you a great perspective and discussion point to help set direction for the employee. So my feeling here is, yes, a lot of people don't want to use it for that purpose because you're right, it hasn't been necessarily made to do that. But I guess there's a lot of companies doing that now because they want to aim a little bit more or target more of a personal angle with the performance review. And you'll see a lot of people call it old-fashioned now to have annual reviews without using these 360s. So, don't be afraid to use it. I think it can work well. Again, just make sure that there's no financial gain tied to this, anything to do with their salaries, for example, or any kind of reward. So coming on to stage 4, as I say today, I just wanted to go through tips and tricks and just clear some ideas, because I get asked so many questions about when to use this. I thought if I just give you a little bit of information about each stage, that might make you feel a little bit more comfortable to use it. So stage 4. Of course, there is this step, and that's about all the uploading of the questions and all the people's emails into your Finks account for the actual system to start using it. But I didn't want this to be a technical video for you today, but I also wanted you to understand how it went, but also where to go and find all the wonderful things that are there, all the wonderful resources. So obviously what happens in a simple nutshell, you are going to be creating the questionnaire. You upload a spreadsheet of respondents using Excel that goes up into Finks. What the Finks does is it automates and automatically invites and places reminders sent from the system for when the people can start answering, etc., or when it's closing off. The other thing obviously Finks will do is when it's time and it's closed off, it can generate the actual report. Now you'll say, so Becky, how do you do that? It's very easy. You will all have access now to the VIP pages on hrprofiling.solutions.com website. There is a myriad of great resources in there, including how-to videos, including guides and a consultant guide for those that are consultants. There is some really good step-by-step information on how to read the results, but also actually how to make your own questionnaire, for example. So please don't be shy at looking at that. It's something actually, because I didn't do it that regularly, I got a little bit rusty on. So just downloading and making my own sort of folder regarding it helped me come back to it and practice it a little bit more. So as I said, didn't want to go into technical. We can look at that another time if needs be. But I wanted to have a look at the final stage, which is understanding and reading the data itself. And this can be a bit of an art form sometimes, but I've seen it done really well and I've seen it done poorly. But it's really good just to be exposed to it and understand that there actually is 2 different reports as well, and have a look at those. So the first thing is, with the Open 360, the feedback assessment is based on a 5-point Likert answering scale using positive and negative numbers, as you can see on the screen. The Open 360 feedback displays the results using numbers and traffic light colours, so it's even easier for us to understand what's working and what might be a development area. So going through it, green indicates that the assessed has scored highly in the measured behavioural competency, or that particular question, I should say. Yellow indicates that there is some room for improvement, and the red indicates a definitive area for improvement. So you can sort of see how it goes there. So let's have an actual look at one so you can see. I've just pulled out a summary out of a 360 that was done. And you can see here that actually out of all of that, there's quite a few yellows, a few greens, but there's one red. So this is the summary page, and then you can click into or go to the planning and prioritizing. You can see where the red is standing out, and you can see that that's a development area. So when I went into that subheading of questions, I could see that the manager, under all the questions, had marked the person as being poor or under the average anyway. And so with how that came through, of course, there's a lot of reds. What I found really interesting here, though, was that, and this is where opinions or more so perspective comes into it, you can see that actually the person themselves, the self-assessor, has marked themselves as a 1. So they felt that they were good at this particular thing. This can sort irrelevant information and interruptions. Yet the manager's perception is that there's a lot of room for improvement there. And you can see the peers are also have a minus score, and we'll be looking at the minuses a bit more too. So altogether, those pairs have got a minus 0.40. So that's getting to a point where it's not quite red, but it's getting there. Then this person's, and this was a leader, this person's direct reports had also the perception that this person was above average or good at this particular thing. So I started to have a look at this and think, well, how is the leader and in this situation male, his direct reports feel that he's good, and why does the manager and the peers feel that their opinions or perception is that he's got areas to improve there? So that was a whole development in itself about perception. And in this situation, it was quite situational. There was definitely things that the managers and peers would see that the direct reports didn't, and vice versa. And that's why a 360 can be quite good, because if you'd just gone straight to his direct reports, they would have said, yeah, no development needed in this area. And vice versa with the managers and peers, we would have only found out that they thought that he needed a lot of improvement. So it's pretty important to get that well-rounded idea. And then for me as a consultant, I was able to really nut down onto what it was causing those issues. And we did actually find it out. So here's another one that can highlight specific issues. So note the red on issues 6, which address poor performance and a clear plan for improvement. Both self and the manager's scores are the same, but both are -1s. So in this situation, this is a particular coaching or development area that I really honed in on, because both the person themselves and the manager were seeing this as an issue. And I have to say, others in this situation, it wasn't broken into direct reports or peers. It was coming to an issue point with them as well. So that was definitely a development area. So you can start to see what I mean. So it's sometimes honing in. The reds are pretty obvious. Your reds are pretty critical. I do tend to address those first, but the yellows are also something that needs a discussion point after. I get asked all the time, you know, should I put open questions in? Because actually it gives people too much room to be too critical. And they are right. There are times where having open questions in, people go for gold and really put some extreme information in. However, I find them amazing, because if I've missed anything, as I said in the questions, this is where I can really look at others' thoughts about those areas. So for any coach or trainer, they'll find this page excellent. It's about discussion. And there's definitely times I tell people as well, hey, if you do have some information to give on the open questions as part of the pre-planning, keep it succinct and to the point, and make sure it's above the line. So each person that is responding has got a line there, as you see, so everyone here is able to contribute. Now, in the setup, by the way, you are able to pick things like skip or force everyone to have to put something. And that's for all questions. You can put if they're able to skip or they have to answer before continuing, but that's totally up to you. I tend to force them to answer. Otherwise, if there's any tension or something, they don't want to put information down. So open questions, it's a yes for me. To be honest, you can make the whole 360 open the whole way. But as I say, for me, I tend to do it just after each question group, because as you can see here, this is just one. This is on one particular question that was open. You do get quite a response back. So it makes the report pretty hefty to go through and utilise. So just a very quick summary with where we're at with the 360 report itself. The big picture is that you get scores for each question group and write down into the individual questions themselves. in a simple look at it, the high scores tend to be strengths and the lower scores tend to be development areas. However, obviously, you have difference of opinions in some areas too. So those are the issues. Now, it's for that reason that I tend to consult a lot using something called the blind spot or 360 blind spot report. I tend to love this one. So this tends to help me understand the difference in perspectives. Note that there's another column on the far right-hand side there. I've now got self, I've got direct reports, management, and this one, sorry, is it management? And then I have a total, but then I also have blind spot. So it takes all the answering groups except for the self and it averages it out, and then it compares that average to the self, so the person answering it. It gives me a standard deviation. It helps me look for any perspectives that are completely out of alignment. So in this example, as you can see on the slide, it shows bright red when the standard deviation goes past a set point. Meaning when there is too much difference between what the candidate, or sorry, the respondent thought about themselves, self-assessing, and what the other group thought as a combination. So this is pretty important. So it doesn't necessarily single out per group. It gives you a complete average as well. So just to note that because something is green, however, doesn't necessarily mean it's not a development area. What that means is just that all the parties have the same perspective on that point as the assessor themselves. So red or yellow means that there's some discrepancy in their perspectives. So there can be a green traffic light on critical, for example. So you can have a green, but it's because, so if I use, quite often I use this as an example. If I said to you, gosh, is Becky good at using PowerPoint? And you will put in, she's incredibly bad, and I put in, oh, I'm fantastic. There's going to be a bright red traffic light there because of what I thought and what you thought as a collective group. However, if I thought that I was incredibly bad as well, and you thought I was incredibly bad, it's going to show as green. It's going to show as a minus, but it will still show as green. So again, just to reiterate, green can still be a development area, but it just means that mostly the perspective of all the parties agree to that. Hope I haven't confused you, but I do find this particular report amazing to use. So just having a look here, the 360s are ideal to be used in many different ways, but they blind spots can pick up any, well, I guess, self-sabotaging behaviours. And can I just go back and actually just explain what I mean here? Did you see here on this particular information that if you got a negative red, what that means is at the end of the day, the person is more than likely being very self-critical of themselves. A negative yellow is moderately self-critical. When you get a green, they have a similar perception. So just to reiterate, this is the self versus everyone else as an average. Then we start getting into a result that is positive yellow. So they're very self-assured of themselves. And then we get into a positive red. And this is where they are overly self-assured. For example, if I had said, yes, I'm brilliant at PowerPoint and you said I wasn't. So that's going to give me a look of being overly self-assured. So this again is actually quite good for me to nut down as what perception could be going on here. And it's surprisingly accurate when it comes to discussing things with people. So back to this one here. So yes, you can identify it for any self-sabotaging behaviour. They're used to understand behaviours that may not be fully conscious of as yet, so as we call blind spots, but they can highlight those areas to focus on. Just go gently on these, obviously. I meet a lot of people when I do this that just have no idea that they have a potential development area in these areas. And so they truly, truly are blind spots. So you do have to tread a little lightly here. The other one is obviously highlighting strengths. Knowing what our strengths are and getting feedback on it. It feels very motivating to have this as well. It's incredible self-awareness. Understanding where an individual excels in the job gives a lot of leverage. The third one is recognizing development areas, of course, and that's identifying areas to map out pathways for. The 360s can be used to review or frame up coaching sessions or enhance collaboration between individuals, managers and team. And that's often what I'm trying to aim at as well. So it's very likely that most people have a blind spot of some sort. The 360 Thinks produces blind spot reports specifically for this type of thing. If you want a little bit of further information on this, I did a webinar back in 2018 called Leadership Perception, and we nutted down a lot more into what perception was using the 360 blind spot report as well. So in quick summary, a good 360 really needs to excel in sort of 3 areas really, and the Think system does all this. The pre-admin setup, they must be easy to set up from an admin point of view, have helpful questions options, so the right questions for the right circumstances can be chosen, and online instructions to participants are nice and clear, and which they can be. They must be easy to execute. Some of the 360s can be downright confusing that I've used before. The Thinks Online process is simple with data automatically captured and channeled back to a center point, charts, graphs printed, etc. with the color. Just on that note, of course, you have to have the right information on your Excel spreadsheet to upload into Thinks. And that's probably the #1 cause of issues. People not double checking people's emails so the email doesn't go anywhere or they've spelt it incorrectly. So they must also be easy to present with easy to understand data. That means you need to not just highlight the obvious red issues, but lead the discussion on both green and yellow type issues so that there's a balance and it's not just about completely finding and plugging into the negative of things as well. So again, just be careful of dealing with blind spots. You're likely to get a bit more resistance if it's not done well. So a bit of a long webinar today, but I just wanted to go over all those different stages. But look, it's fairly easy to set up. Yes, there's a few forms that you need to collate and download. Everything is on the VIP under the 360 area. And otherwise the ladies at HR Profiling can help as well. The other alternative is that HR Profiling can charge a small setup fee. And I know for the first probably 2 or 3, I got them to do this because, well, just for me, time, and 2, just watching it be done for the first time. I'm an I style, so detail is not my finest points. So from experience though, I have to say, just learning and thinking about the questionnaires, learning and understanding about how to discuss some of these. They are really personal to people, but boy, do they give such amazing insight, not just to the person, but the team and the organization as well. So I use them always in a leadership development area. And now we are starting to use them in annual reviews as well in the right way. So look, if you have any questions, of course, shoot them through. I hope I haven't been too long-winded today, but there's just so much that you can talk about with a 360 and where you can use it in the different applications. So I know it was a nice casual webinar today. So if you have any questions, fire them over to HR Profiling and they can either pop them to me to answer, or the girls there are pretty right up with all the 360 information. So, hey, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for listening. It's always motivating to have so many live people listening. And I will see you next time for the next webinar. Take care. Bye.